Oasis Life Church would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, study, work, worship and meet, the Barada Barna people. We also pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Indigenous people who are with us today.
I'm pretty excited to deliver this message today. There's a lot of thought as we're going into this. It's been on my mind, this sort of topic, for a while now, and I'm sort of honoured to be able to share that with you. So I think it's best to start off with a story today. Some time ago, we bought the house that we currently live in right now, and it wasn't perhaps the nicest house, but we saw some potential in it. So we got it and started renovating it, and after a while and a fair bit of money and a little bit more money and a little bit more money and a little bit more money after that, we finished our kitchen and bathroom. And even though the house wasn't completely finished, it was kind of around the time of Thanksgiving. So we thought, let's hold a housewarming Thanksgiving party. My wife is American, if you weren't aware, so we celebrate things like Thanksgiving in our household. If you've never had Thanksgiving dinner, that's okay, we're in Australia, but it's wonderful. The meal itself, you've got like your turkey, but you also got this like a heap of other amazing food and sides as well. So it rivals Christmas in terms of the meal it is. It is just wonderful. You get the same bonus of a nice little carpet snake nap at the end of the day as well. So we thought, let's invite, I think it was like 20 people. We've got a new kitchen, that should be good. But as time got closer, we realised that we hadn't invited 20 people. We had invited 20 families. I'm sure we universally understand that in the world of catering, 20 people and 20 families are different amounts of food. So I'm thinking, oh man, like what are we going to do? It almost became fearful, like that's too many for us to cook for. So what do we do? Like, do we uninvite people? You can't do that. It's just rude. The invitations are set out. People are interested. They've responded. But with just Mel and I, we also couldn't cater for everybody. The solution was that we reached out for help. We could only cook one turkey in the time that we had, and we calculated that we needed to cook 4. So we reached out to see if anybody would cook a turkey for us. And we had different families, they bring a turkey, people got the recipes for some of the sides, and we all came together. And the result was that we had plenty of food, everyone got fed, and we had leftovers as well. But there could have been many different options to solve our conundrum, couldn't there? Perhaps instead of reaching out and unifying, we could have given into the fear. Tried to reduce the number of people who were coming instead of increasing the number of people being a part of things. Perhaps we could have divided the group by their different characteristics, created an us and a them. Perhaps we could have made the event really, really churchy, right? So that our friends who don't go to church wouldn't feel welcome or would feel uncomfortable and leave really, really early and wouldn't eat much food. Perhaps we could charge a really high entry fee so our friends from lower incomes were unable to come. Perhaps we could make the house look empty and close the doors and windows and turn off the lights and make it look like no one was home and make sure that no one could get in, except we tell a few of the inner echelon of friends, the party's actually still on, you just need to sneak through the back door. No, that's actually just, so you know, really horrible ways to ensure that you can cater for a housewarming party. But from a general point of view, all of those options are responses driven by fear and caused by splitting our group into us and them and splitting them into different characteristics. We got our gathering over the line by being kind. We also did that by ensuring there wasn't an us and a them, and by reaching out and actually bringing more people into the fold. It was a little bit daunting still feeding all those people, but we had the tools, we had the capability to feed them. We just needed the passion and the unity to be able to do it. Us and them. Can you say it with me? Us and them. Meaning, we identify as a group, and outside of that is a them. So, us and them is a concept that's existence since the dawn of man. It's a natural byproduct of having different tribes and societies and cultures and beliefs. It's a byproduct due to humans being social creatures. We thrive in community, and when we have a sense of contribution and belonging, it's still true today. Indeed, in many social animals like primates, we see us and them tribe ideals being played out. And for the most part, it's got a lot of benefits. At its most basic part, we can see a herd or a flock or a swarm of animals But when we have animals with higher social intelligence, particularly with primates in particular, we see definite appearance of tribes and groups. And in fact, in adolescent primates, we even see evidence of gangs and revenge attacks and territory wars. There's even different styles of leadership behaviour from alphas in different primate communities as well. We know that survival is easier in a group of people. With a group, we don't have to know a little bit of everything. With a group, we can find our one or two strengths and excel at that, while another person uses their strengths to cover your weakness. So I may not be the best at building a hut, but perhaps Kimmy is. But I'm really good at organising and rationing food, so that gives us food security, and that's important as well. And so by working together, I free up time for Kimmy to focus all her efforts on hut building, and I get to focus all my time on food security because I don't have to worry about a hut. We get a better built hut with better food security instead of an average to poor sort of everything. It means we go from most likely hungry and thirsty and sleepless nights alone in a mud hut to being, for the most part, well-fed, watered, sheltered, protected, in a nicer, stronger dwelling than we could ever hope to build by ourselves. And we have enough time and energy surplus that we can not only survive, but we thrive. We innovate. We brainstorm. We create a better spear. Maybe we build a better bow and arrow, better defences, medicine, hospitals, electricity, computers, great works of art, spaceflight. It's a pretty rapid increase there in our ability when we work together. But in order to have that, society, what's one thing we need? We need trust, right? We need trust. We need to know that despite the better comforts available to us, we need to know that we aren't, or most likely aren't, going to be attacked or hurt or worse. Or at least we need to know that the chances of that happening are profoundly lower than if we were out in the wilderness on our own. So how do we ensure that for the most part, people in our tribe aren't dangerous or threaten all of the good things that come with a functioning society? So we have rules and expectations and a way of doing things, because we know that if someone can do all of those things, that there's a good chance that they're like-minded. And if you're generally a good person and someone is like-minded with you, then you can have a moderate confidence that there's compatibility, that they're pretty safe, or at least they appear to be. So those who follow this general unspoken list of expectations and who you or we view as similar and like-minded get lumped with us, and those who don't get lumped with them. And the us people are considered safe and the them people are considered a little bit more risky. And those basic views work in all parts of life, and I think they can drive us to be better. We all are either an us or a them, and we want us to win over them. Apple versus Android drives us to build better phones. Supporting your NRL or AFL soccer teams, whatever it is, drives better sports programs. Wanting our country to win gold at the Olympics drives things like the Australian Institute of Sports. Competing businesses drive competitive pricing and services. It's that competition between us and them that helps push society. And in many cases, I would argue, it drives us to be better. So we know that being in a community, having an us, makes our chance of survival better. Not only survival, but thriving as well. And I think that sense of belonging is deeply ingrained to us as human beings. Perhaps that's why it hurts so deeply at our core when we're rejected or shunned from a community or group, or even if we think we might be, right? It's tugging at a deeply rooted survival program in our brain. We all know inherently, even as little children, the pain of being rejected or alone. And the thing is, whether you like it or not, both and us, and we are both an us or a them. What defines or classifies you in that is simply perception from people. So there's a dark side of an us and them. If being in the group makes us feel safe, it perhaps implies something negative about anyone who we see in the them category. And while community and working together gives us benefit and safety and suspicion and fear is what can easily abound when we look at them. We don't understand them. We struggle to see why they do the things they do or think the way they think. They do strange things that we ourselves would never do. And sometimes we can see absolutely no similarity or like-mindedness at all. And so what do our brains do? It's strange. It's different. We don't understand. We default to threat. And so despite us and them helping to build amazing things in society, it also has been the single biggest origin of our conflicts and our wars and our polarization. Human beings have committed atrocious, hideous acts because of us and them mentality. In order for there to be an us, there needs to be a them. So you get all this identity and power from a group by being us, but that comes essentially from a threat, perhaps an adversary, a them. We need to be careful. We need to be careful where the them comes from. It is one of the easiest things to hijack and corrupt. Not only can we make the them seem far worse or reprehensible than they actually are, but the fear of being kicked out, of losing the us status, can also be used against you to control and manipulate slowly and subtly. And ultimately, it can be used to destroy us from within. I look at this church with love and passion, and I vow to never, ever have that be us. We cannot be destroyed from within. We need to fight back. Are you with me? The brutal reality is that my feeling as a Christian points me to my Lord and Saviour as a fighter. It points me to the man who once, in loneliness, surrounded only by a few followers, recognized things for what they were and summoned to us the fight against this threat. God's truth was greatest, not as a sufferer, but as a fighter. In boundless love, as a Christian, as a man, I read through the passage which tells us about how the Lord at last rose in his might and seized the scourge and corruption, drove it out of the temple. How powerful was his fight for the world against this divisive poison. Today, after over 2,000 years, with deep emotion, I recognize more profoundly than ever the fact that it was to cleanse us of our sins that he had to shed his blood upon the cross. As Christians, we have no higher duty to allow ourselves to be cheated or misled, but we have a duty to be a fighter, to fight for truth and for justice. Yes? No. No. There's no to that. The last paragraph I read to you was not written by me. It was read out in Munich on the 12th of April in 1922. By a man named Adolf Hitler, a perpetuator of some of the most evil and brutal crimes against humanity that we'll ever know of. I just swapped a couple words out. To me, his legacy is one of the starkest lessons in how use of charisma and words are able to hijack where them comes from and use it to divide, control, and perpetuate horror. You want to permanently change your worldview, as a side note, you read Uncensored what happened in those concentration camps. You read what they did to men and women and children. It will break you. It broke me. I am forever changed having read that. And we need to ensure that horror like that cannot be repeated. We need to ensure that forever the narrative cannot be hijacked by extreme views on either side of the political or social spectrum. The thing is, that kind of behaviour just doesn't appear. The camps and wider perspective, large-scale evil works don't just pop out of anywhere. That's the ultimate summoning, the end game of evil. And I remember sitting in school reading about this, and I was thinking, like, how do they all just go along with this? How does a whole group of people just enable someone so evil? And there's several reasons that feed into that, but one important thing to remember is that the end game, the camps and horror that folded there, didn't just happen. They didn't just build it. Remember the paragraph I shared with you was spoken around 20 years. It was spoken in 1922, 20 years before all the horror was really happening. Endgame horrors happen when the us and them narrative is changed, and it was hijacked to make the us feel good and part of a mission, and the them to become increasingly seen as less worthy, less human, dangerous, a threat. But it was sold slowly, progressively. That evil didn't just appear out the open with the end game in mind. It started by hijacking the feelings and emotions and the narrative and turn that back onto people and start warping their own worldviews. It's dangerous territory, I'll tell you that much. It was used to create an us and them that both made the them seem increasingly dangerous and evil and even less human, and the us team increasingly critical to be a part of for fear of being rejected. And of course, if you're excluded or rejected from us, then what does that make you? It makes you a them. And you've already been led to believe that those people are evil and dangerous and repulsive, and you aren't like that. So you increasingly, with greater desperation, find yourself more likely to follow the common voice of that leader, who ultimately has a plot of control. So that's an extreme example, right? That's a culmination, the end game of some of the pinnacles of evil of mankind coming to fruition. But if we aren't careful, with extremist views, we as a church can easily fall victim to an us and them mentality. One of the people I follow and whose books I've read is Dr. David Gushee, who is a professor for Christian ethics at Mercer University, which is based in Georgia in the United States. He states, and I agree, that the Christian church in particular is at a greater risk of being corrupted by forces of extremism and having a narrative hijacked. This divisive force eventually leads to extremism, polarization, and rejection. Everything that goes against what Christ asked us to do as believers, isn't it? The paragraph I read earlier, right, it uses powerful descriptors. We're called to rise in wrath, that we're soldiers of Christ, that Christians need to fight. And it's powerful wording, and it's designed to elicit emotion, and the emotion that clouds judgment. The terrifying thing for me in all of this is that I hear and see very similar wording in extreme fundamentalist churches online right now. It doesn't take long for you to search to find some crazy stuff. Talking about rising up and cleansing the land and being soldiers, that Christians are in a war, your future is at peril. If you hear strong talk like that, I'm going to say it needs to be a red flag. It's like, what are we fighting, mate? What are we fighting? Last I checked, we're called to be fishers, not soldiers. And it's like, what's driving you to respond or move in that mission? Is it a motivation of love? Are you motivated by making people's lives better? Or are you motivated by fear? Are you fearful of the future? Because if someone's making you fearful of the future and then simultaneously telling you what you need to do to fix that fear and fight back as well, but the world is coming to get you. So we need to stay close. We need to band together. There needs to be alarm bells coming off. Beware in the church of divisive us and them statements that make you fearful, that are clothed with biblical, or at least biblical sounding words. Matthew 22, verse 36 to 39. What's the greatest commandment? So the backstory to this, some religious leaders at the time said to Jesus, like, what? There's all these laws. What are the greatest commandments? Jesus answers, to first love God, and the second is like it, to love people. It's not to rise and be a soldier. It is to love God and to love people. And the basis of Jesus' statement was from Leviticus, which was part of the rules back then, from chapter 19, verse 18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anybody among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. That says unity to me. That fights against the narrative of fear-driven, us and them mentality. If we look in the book of Genesis, and particularly the story of Adam and Eve, it's like the most referenced, understood pop culture image to bring up, right? The man, the woman, the tree, the snake, the apple. In writing this, I think I'll unpack Genesis a bit more in depth with my next message, because it's so rich. It is so rich, surprisingly rich, and it's detailed when it's analysed beyond just a literal, surface level read. So I think I'm scheduled in December. I think I'll unpack that then. But today specifically, in the story of Adam and Eve, I want to look at the fall, the eating of the fruit. I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 3, which covers the fall. The backstory, if you haven't read the story of Adam and Eve, is that they're the first humans that God created, and they're in paradise, and all is good, and there's a tree in the middle of the garden that gives you knowledge of good and evil. And God says to them, you can eat anything you want, just don't touch that tree. No touchy. So now we see the chapter 3, and it's called the fall, which may subtly suggest that perhaps that did not happen. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, you'll surely not die. For God knows that in the day that you eat it, your eyes will be opened. You'll be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was pleasant to the eyes, and a desirable one, and desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave it to her husband with her, and he ate. And their eyes of them were both open, and they both knew that they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made themselves covering. And they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid together from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden. And the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, where are you? And so he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat? And the man said, the woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. And the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this that you've done?" And the woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." God then goes on to curse the serpent. There's a lot of trouble for men and women because of this. There's just so much to unpack from this story. We can't process it today. It's for a different topic. But for now, I'll just hyper-focus when we're talking about us and them. But I want to focus on just that for now. Specifically, the fall, because I think there's a lesson for us in this. And you can get something out of this, by the way, if you believe literally or metaphorically about the creation story, regardless of where you are in your spiritual walk, right? So we have man and woman in the garden in harmony and paradise and unity. And then we have the snake, the serpent. We know that eating from the tree of knowledge brings consequences. And God said, don't do this. The serpent wants mankind to eat from the tree. Now, the interesting point from this, and there's a lot of glossing over, of course, is the way in which Adam and Eve are deceived. If the serpent had rocked up and said, you should destroy this paradise, cause unrest, chaos by eating the fruit that God specifically told you not to eat, the answer, I think, probably would have been no. No, I don't want to do this evil thing. I don't want to ruin the harmony and sow chaos. But the serpent doesn't do that, does it? Let's revisit. The serpent said to the woman, you will surely not die, for God knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The Common English Version summarizes it quite well as well. The snake said to the woman, you won't die. God knows that on the day that you eat from it, you'll see clearly. You'll be like God, knowing good and evil. Do you notice how it's sold? It's not, do you want to destroy, sow chaos, violate the rules? It's sold in a pleasing manner. Like, hey, do you want the ability to see what is good and evil? You'll gain the wisdom that God has. Look how wise he is. Think of the things we could do. Like, that's a powerful sell to me. I'm just being honest. I probably would have been a very rubbish Adam. So why is it so powerful, and what does it say? Well, to me, it's the first evidence of someone manipulating the us and them mentality to hijack for a purpose that causes chaos. And it's powerful because it's not sold in a negative spin. It's not like, hey, do you want to do this evil thing? It's sold smoothly. It's given as a positive. It might make you feel like you're being elevated. You'll gain this. Look at all the benefits, but it hides the dark underbelly lurking within. So we have a situation where peace, contentedness, harmony reign, but there's always a snake. There is always a snake. That's true in story, but it's also true in real life, right? There is always a snake, a metaphorical creature that does two things. One, he points out what's wrong, and two, tries to offer a fix for that. There may not actually be a threat or anything wrong at all. We might have unity and harmony already, but the snake comes in, points out a flaw, gives a temptation, shows a threat, sows discord, causes us to fear, to see a threat, even one made up, and then offers a solution on what we need to do. We have an us and a them. In Adam and Eve, the narrative for humans and God was changed to us and them. We went from us walking with God to humans and God. We're different. We go from unity and walking as one to living a life that's actually ruled and driven by fear. Remember we spoke earlier about how when you're in the us group and it looks like you're going to be moved to the them group, or you're rejected or possibly even rejected, you have this fear, right? You're motivated by fear. Well, we also see this when God is questioning Adam and Eve, like life partners made from each other, right? But now they're staring down the barrel of rejection and removal from paradise, from us, straight up. The man, we didn't do this. She gave me the fruit, the woman. We didn't do this. I didn't do this. It was all the serpent. It's always just like, if you read it, you can always feel this growing desperation to avoid being moved from us to them. Hey, and we'll unpack this a bit later, maybe in December when I'm next on, but we'll leave it there. But I think there are two good parts in Adam and Eve that serve as good lessons. Remember, whether you like it or not, you are both an us and a them. What defines or classifies you in that perception is simply perception from people. If you can change the perception of what defines us and what defines them, you can split even the most unified of people. Remember, if someone makes you fearful of the future or something and then simultaneously tells you that they have the answer to fix that fear, there needs to be a few alarm bells going off. The problem we face, and I'm borrowing a little bit from a John Cleese comedy skit here, is that extremism makes you feel good because it provides you with enemies, provides you with a them. This is great if you already have a little bit of resentment and fear in you anyway that's being stoked up, because now you have an outlet where you can sum up all of the problems in life and society, bottle it up, and say if it wasn't for them, that this place would be much better. Now you can say all the nasty, unthoughtful things you like and pretend you're only doing it as a champion or true fighter of the cause. Everybody else is sheep. I have this unique inside information that protects us. This effect is rapidly enhanced with social media, where you not only see someone sticking it to them, right, but you get a little drip of dopamine in your brain when you click like or love or laugh. It's like that bathroom sticker, isn't it? Like, love, laugh. And then you have a social media algorithm seeing that and feeding you more and more of whatever it is that got that interaction out of you, regardless of how much it makes us and them appear increasingly different. And this is where I think we're at risk, particularly in our belief. Exclusion in Christianity is easy. If you're particularly clever, you can hide the exclusion with a biblical term or two. You can say, well, that's just the truth of it. We're bringing salt and light, which is easy to speak, right? And it feels good. It rolls easily. It feels good to act as a special defender of the truth, a harbinger of the true gospel, right? Being a salt and light bringer reinforces your group. It's church versus the world. It's all out war, and in war there's casualties, so it's okay that we offend. It's okay that people fall away. I'm just bringing the truth to you. How you react is up to you. And that kind of talk in the church is easy, right? It's easy. It's an easy win where you can feel good about yourself and show how you can defend us from them. It also removes a little bit of power and humanity from them. So now that person with a concern or a disagreement doesn't need to be engaged or validated, because we can call them fallen or backsliders or troublemakers or unanointed. That person who lives a different lifestyle can be reduced to being misguided, led astray. That's not who we're called to be. It is easier for people to say that than to pursue the one. Now, if you're kind of new to church or you haven't heard the term the one or leaves the 99, when I say the one, I'm referring to Matthew chapter 18, verse 10 to 14. I'll give you the Common English version. Be careful that you don't look down on one of these little ones. I say to you that their angels in heavens are always looking into the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? If someone had 100 sheep and one of them wandered off, wouldn't he leave the 99 on the hillsides and go and search for the one that wandered off? If he finds it, I assure you that he is happier about having the one sheep than about the 99 who didn't wander off. In the same way, my Father who is in heaven doesn't want to lose one of these little ones. One thing straight up I see when I read this is that it's much easier to sit with the 99 and say, well, that's what happens. That sheep didn't keep up. Because the opposite requires what? Effort, self-control, discipline, love. It's the same with people, right? It's easier for us to switch to us and them. It's easy to say they're a backslider, they're a troublemaker, they're fallen, they're unanointed, whatever. Because the opposite means we have to get off our backsides and actually pursue people. And people are complex with deep feelings and emotions and diverse upbringings. They've known different joys and tragedies. They've got unique experience and trauma. And it takes time and effort to get through that, to connect with someone on a base level, to meet them where they are, to walk with them, not to dictate to them, not to look down to them, not to put this super sort of weird, super happy Christian mask on, but to treat them as the loved and cherished, fearfully, wonderfully made creation they truly are. That requires work. But it's worth it. The pursuit is worth it. Remember the Thanksgiving dinner. It was worth bringing extra people into the fold to help us get that meal ready for everybody, rather than decreasing the crowd size. But if we apply the Adam and Eve lessons we've got, that one person, that one voice who says, you look stressed. Do you want an easier day? That person you invited, they didn't remember your birthday. That person you invited didn't pay you back for that thing you gave them. All those people there, what have they done for you lately? You don't have to work so hard. If you just invite less people, it's like the smooth cell, yeah? Because the reality is, and I'm talking metaphorically, is that God is putting on a massive feast for us. And everyone is invited. There is room at the table for everyone. There's enough food for everyone to eat, and God's meal is a good meal. It's not what society offers up. It's not some sugary, temporary processed meal that makes you feel content for a little while. This meal truly satisfies you. and people are hungry. But it's a little bit daunting. There are a lot of people who would eat at our table. It takes effort to get this meal ready. We might have to shift our chairs over a little and squeeze more people in. And it might take effort also to ensure that everyone who is invited actually feels welcomed to the house to sit at the table. The opposite is where we still have the same table size, the same amount of food and everything that God provides, but in fear we've chased people away. We've locked the doors to stop them from getting in, and there's only a few select people sitting at the table, still paranoid that all the food is going to be taken. And we're better than that. That's what we say here. We're better together. The church, I believe, can be the best vehicle to push back against extremism of a fear-driven us and them mentality. Extremism takes all the food for itself, leaves a tiny little bit of food for you, points to the window and says, hey, they want that food you've got. God says there's plenty of food for all. Everyone is welcome at the table. Come as you are, drink, eat, be nourished spiritually. But the church has got to resolve that everyone can be part of this feast and work to ensure that practically this happens and not just speak it. I want to leave you with a quote from a wonderful author, the late Rachel Held Evans. It sums up why. Why do we need to bring people to the table? Why do we need to break down fear-driven us and them? This is what God's kingdom is like. A bunch of outcasts and oddballs gathered at a table. Not because they are rich or worthy or good, but because they are hungry. Because they said yes, and there's always room for more. There's still an us and them mentality, but I propose that it's one that's different. There's an us who are fortunate and wealthy, and a them who are poor, weak, and weary. That motivates me to step out and help wherever I can. There's an us with a voice and power in society, and a them who are marginalized and silenced. That motivates me to lift people up and give them a say. There's an us and a them, and it's one that doesn't have to be driven by fear, but rather love. Love that keeps us motivated to do better. That's something I can get behind. Can you?
Thanks for joining us today. To find out more information about our church or services, you can contact us by emailing office@oasislife.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or join our WhatsApp group. Thanks again and have a great week.